For Pacifica Radio, I'm Christina Onnested. Ukraine's unprecedented cross-border invasion into Russia continues for a seventh day. Today, Russia says it's evacuating residents from a second town. Ukraine's president is speaking publicly for the first time about the Russia incursion. FSN's Megumi Lim reports from Ukraine's capital, Kiev.
Authorities in Russia's Belgorod region said evacuations had begun from the Krasnaya Yaruga district due to the increase of Ukrainian military activity along the border and a possible expansion of the ongoing incursion. Ukrainian forces have continued their operations since their offensive into Russia's Kursk region began last Tuesday in what has now become the biggest cross-border raid since the full-scale invasion began. The attacks caught Russia by surprise, prompting mass evacuations and allowing Kiev to advance as much as 30 kilometers into the Kursk region. Moscow imposed a sweeping security regime in the regions of Kursk, Bryansk, and Belgorod last Friday. Kiev broke its silence on the incursion over the weekend when President Zelensky, in his nightly video address, said he received reports from Ukraine's top commander on, quote, actions to push the war onto the aggressor's territory. Megumi Lim in Kyiv.
Palestine's health ministry in Gaza says Israeli strikes over the last 48 hours have killed 102 Palestinians, wounding 150 others. The majority were killed by an Israeli airstrike on a school in Gaza City. Many of the dead are unidentifiable. Images show body parts in bags, and videos show people describing the carnage. The Palestinian Authority in the West Bank called the strike a heinous, bloody massacre. Israel said it was targeting Hamas militants. Gaza's government media office told Al Jazeera 3 bombs were dropped on the school in Gaza City, matching the U.S.-made Mk-84 bombs that weigh 2,000 pounds each. CNN is also reporting the bombs used on the school were made in the U.S. The strike occurred less than 24 hours after the Biden administration pledged another $3.5 billion in military aid to Israel. Israel's now focusing strikes in southern Gaza, where it's dropped leaflets ordering new evacuations. The United Nations says some 75,000 Palestinians have been displaced from southwest Gaza in recent days. The European Union's top diplomat and foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, today condemned the comments from Israel's far-right national security minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, as making an incitement to war crimes and called for sanctions to be placed on the European Union agenda against Israel. He made the statements on social media after Ben-Gvir late Sunday said Israel should block the entry of humanitarian aid and fuel into Gaza until Hamas releases the remaining 110 hostages. He's also advocated for resettling parts of Gaza. His statements echoed comments from Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich last week that justified blocking aid for civilians as long as Israeli hostages are held by Hamas. The United Nations condemned those statements. Jeremy Lawrence is a spokesperson.
The starvation of civilians as a method of warfare is a war crime. The collective punishment of the Palestinian population is also a war crime. This direct and public statement risks inciting other atrocity crimes. Such statements, especially by public officials, must cease immediately. They must be investigated, and if found to amount to a crime, must be prosecuted and punished.
The United Nations says 96% of Gaza's population now faces crisis levels of hunger. The leaders of France, Germany, and Britain released a joint statement today calling for a ceasefire in Gaza, the return of scores of hostages, some 110 still held by Hamas, and unfettered delivery of humanitarian aid. Their statement comes as ceasefire talks are expected to resume Thursday, though Hamas has indicated it may not participate. Vice Vice President and Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris was in San Francisco Sunday. The fundraiser featured prominent California Democrats, including Nancy Pelosi. Speaker Emerita Pelosi said it raised more than $12 million. Outside the event, protesters of the war in Gaza rallied, urging the U.S. to stop providing military aid to Gaza. Harris campaigned a day earlier Saturday in Las Vegas, where she pushed the idea of eliminating taxes on tips paid to restaurant and other service industry employees, echoing a pledge from her opponent, Republican Donald Trump, who was quick to jab at Harris, writing on social media, quote, "This was a Trump idea. She has no ideas. She could only steal from me," unquote. His vice presidential pick, J.D. Vance, Ohio senator, has spoken in support of child tax credits. Alex Gonzalez reports.
The Republican VP nominee, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, says he wants to more than double the child tax credit to $5,000. That's in line with his support for larger and more traditional families. Vance, taking a prominent role in the campaign, made the rounds of the Sunday politics shows.
Child tax credit has languished thanks to the Biden administration. Chuck Schumer's been unable to get it through the United States Senate, and we want to have a more pro-family policy.
Democrats call Vance's support for families insincere. Despite bipartisan support in the House, an expanded child credit failed in the Senate, while Vance was absent. Vice President Kamala Harris and her VP pick, Tim Walz, campaigned in Nevada over the weekend. She acknowledged that beating former President Donald Trump won't be easy, but warned personal freedoms and democracy are at stake.
Across our nation, we have been witnessing a full-on assault on hard-won, hard-fought freedoms and fundamental rights.
Harris was joined there by the former Washington State Republican Party chair. Chris Vance is adding his name to the growing list of Republicans endorsing the Democrat. He cites national security and protecting democracy.
And I'm here in Nevada for a Kamala Harris rally because Republicans who have principles and honor and are willing to put country before party need to support Kamala Harris.
In a state where much of the Democratic strength comes from hospitality unions, Harris signed onto a Trump promise to end taxes on tips, making that a plank for both parties.
And that's Alex Gonzalez reporting. The weather system dubbed Debbie is now entering Canada after leaving flood warnings in effect in North Carolina. Last week, after arriving in Florida as a hurricane, the storm unleashed tornadoes and flooding, damaging homes and taking lives along the East Coast before moving into Canada Saturday. The National Weather Service says localized downpours could result in additional flash flooding throughout the coastal Carolinas. More than 48,000 homes and businesses in Ohio, New York, Pennsylvania, and Vermont still had no electricity by Sunday night. I'm Christina Onnested reporting for Pacifica Radio.